This video is made possible by the Corporation for YouTube Broadcasting, and from monthly Patreon support by viewers like you. Thank you.
Jettison some weight or we'll never make it back to Cybertron.
Well, with that out of the way, I vote myself as the new leader of the Decepticons.
What? The Constructicons form Devastator, the mightiest of all Decepticons. We should be the leader.
Soundwave superior, Constructicons inferior.
Who are you calling inferior? Nobody would follow an uncharismatic boar like you!
Alright, that's it!
Oh, what's going on?
I don't feel so good.
Why, hello YouTube! Greetings from the Lazy Eyebrow to a review of a figure that somehow wound up in Moncton on Black Friday before most people even got their pre-orders delivered to them. Figure that one out. And also to my first review in 4K. Yes, this whole review was shot on a new DSLR camera with a new animation program. Fitting though, since Astrotrain was the first review on this channel, that Astrotrain would be the first to test the new high quality settings. So yes, let's get review number 105 underway. Full steam ahead. Siege Astrotrain was a figure that I'm sure surprised a lot of us when we first heard that his leader class presence was leaked through a Toys R Us listing way back in the spring of 2019. And even more surprised to see that for the first time since his G1 appearance that he'd be coming to us not as a bullet train, not as a full-on double-ended freight train, but as a modernized adaptation of the JNR class D51 locomotive from way back when. That we finally got ourselves a 282 configuration steam locomotive, complete with details like feed pipes, inaccurately molded connecting rods, headlights, smoke box, a weirdly shaped boiler, a dome, a cab, and new to this official release, a tender. Well, no, I'm not super jazzed with the proportions of this train. I will admit I want to take this time to talk about everything that I love about this train. First off, check out where the feet ended up. This is very stylistically placed so as to emulate the dome that the original steam engine this is very loose is based off of had. I love that these driving wheels aren't molded on with these four wheels being the actual things it rolls on. Quite the opposite this time, where the driving wheels are actually the rolling wheels. That's awesome! A tender! Good grief, a tender! This is an addition that, while not accurate to the cartoon source material or even the toy, it's always a welcome accessory to any Astrotrain. All in all, this is an incredible modernized adaptation to the big engine that could. The only thing I really have wrong with it is this stubby front end. From everything backwards from this point, this train is incredible. Especially for it being supposedly a Cybertron train that doesn't even have to look like an Earth vehicle. But we get this stubby little smoke box and these narrow little wheels, and I start wanting to call this thing Percy. Really though, I can easily see some third-party company making some extra piece to slip over the smoke box just so that Astrotrain can have a more proportionalized front end. Make it happen, people! Now this tender, like all great tenders, is removable from the locomotive unit itself. And this is how most of us remember seeing Astrotrain, especially in the original show. Taking a look at the back reveals the signature rocket boosters that Astrotrain is known for hanging off the back of the cab. And these rockets, while wonderfully detailed, don't quite do it for me. Personally, I would love to see some coneage on the back here, like the original toy, and all space shuttles, and even rockets. But even if those never happen, like I say, they are wonderfully detailed, and the silver paint really helps them to pick them out from the main body. For size comparison, Titans Return Astrotrain. Now don't get me wrong, I still love the concept of the Titans version. That is, it really puts the train into Astrotrain. But I will admit, the Siege version really does wonders for the eyes. It's wonderfully detailed and has way less going on, which is awesome. It's also much shorter, even with the tender add-on, and in general I love the colors way more. And while I understand that there was a Takara release of the Titans Return figure that was closer to the Siege figure, it never officially released outside of Japan, so I'm looking at this strictly on the merits of what is and what was commercially available to North America. For other size comparisons, G1 Optimus, Masterpiece Bumblebee, Titans Return Blitzwing, Siege Starscream, and an HO scale GP38, or a CSX freight locomotive for all you non-train people. And alright, so Astrotrain's proportions are still a little wonky, but it's still more or less HO scale for all you model railroaders out there, which means that my collection of HO scale Autobot vehicle modes also fits into scale with Astrotrain here, which really gives you a sense of the absurd mass shifting tomfoolery that happens with each transformation. I mean, look at world's smallest hot rod here. He's barely even as tall as a locomotive. That's crazy. Alrighty then, on to transformation. Move these flaps up, split and swing out the sides here. Retract the front buffers into the smoke box. Split apart said smoke box and fold in the headlight, then reattach the pieces together. Swing it around to reveal the nose cone for the space shuttle, then close the sides back up. At the back, open up these panels and fold down the wings. Rotate around the train wheels so they point backwards. Open up these side panels and then rotate this whole assembly around and close up the panels. Fold the tail fin out, unpeg the thrusters, slot the tail fin into this gap, and then reattach the thrusters. And finally, space shuttle mode. Honestly, it's not a bad space shuttle mode. It's not perfect, but it's easily recognizable as a space shuttle. And this is one area I felt the Titan's return did great though. Well, no, this wasn't a shuttle, more like a cruiser. I was actually quite impressed with it. It took this whole war train, and yes, it did overuse the whole panel thing. It still did give us this really nice and smooth space cruiser that looked flight-worthy. But for those that happily call themselves G1ers, Siege Astrotrain is probably right up your alley. And while I'm not exactly writing it off either, though I do have a few issues with it. Now, while I will admit this mode does far better for looks than the locomotive mode, it's also not perfect. Like, the basic shape of the shuttle is there, more so than the old classics version, but it still has the big heavy jacket on at the front, the big gaps in the midsection where parts were taken out so as to cover up the whole gap where the head was. Like, I'm not going to pretend like turning a train into a space shuttle is easy, but I can still be less than thrilled with the final product. That being said, it does look much better as a shuttle than the classics versions ever got with the weird split-in-half nose train hanging out for a ride. Now, I haven't mentioned yet that Astrotrain comes with 5 additional accessories beyond the tender, and these are rocket launcher, a Gatling gun, some indeterminate rifle, and 2 identical blasters. These can all form together to become a major rifle, but me being me, I totally forgot to film that. So let's talk about the tender first. One of the things it can do is unfold itself for 2 interactions with the shuttle. The first of which is this platform, which I can only assume is for transporting shuttles to the launch site. The second use for it is turning it into the structure, which in reality should be the same structure, you would see at Cape Canaveral for launching the shuttles into space. This is kind of neat, I guess? I don't know, I'm more hyped if this turns into a train tender. So, the guns. This being Siege, of course we have a bajillion 5mm portholes perfect for armoring the heck out of this guy. It's not exactly my cup of tea, but if it's yours, go nuts. And lastly, we also get the rocket launcher. Now me personally, I'm kind of bummed out that we only got 1 of these and not 2, because popping these into the back port of Astrotrain is kind of like an auxiliary booster, which I think is crazy awesome looking in terms of space shuttle mode semi-realism. But again, we only got 1. So how the heck am I supposed to complete the look? On another note, this is Siege, so of course we do retain some functionality with blast effect parts from other figures. And if you have yourself a certain Titan class figure, you can get yourself going rocket thrust, which I think is super awesome that they included 3 of the tiny thruster bits into the Omega set. Almost like this was the intended figure for the extra pieces, so you can make it look like it's cruising through space. For a size comparison, Titan's Return Blitzwing, G1 Prime, Masterpiece Bumblebee, Siege Starscream, and all the characters that supposedly fit into him during the movie. Sure, I mean, why not? So let's jump into bot mode. Start by taking the front sides and swinging them around to the front. Unfold the feet and separate the legs. Take the feet and peg them into a hole found on the inside of the leg. Take the paneling for shuttle and train mode, unpeg it, and peg it into the second hole to give it an angled look. This doesn't do anything for articulation, and barely anything for the looks, but the instructions indicate to do this all the same. Fold the hip skirts down, move the thruster to the back, swing down the entire wing section to clip it into the back, move the tail fin down, rotate down this entire piece, and then fold the side flaps into place. Bring the shoulders down, straighten out the arms, fold out the hands, rotate the arms 180, and Astrotrain! And oh my word, what a figure! This whole thing is just rife with detail. There's just so many molded lines that give off this look of all the parts and panels and pieces that went into this huge figure. The red eyes pop so hard against the silver face. The red abs set against the purple and gray give off a striking look. The shins are big and imposing. The back is riddled with insane amounts of detail and none of it hollow. And the posability is just awesome. Siege so far seems to be giving us all the articulation here with ankle tilts, 180-degree elbows, thigh rotations, everything. And he looks so good in classic poses like pointing and shooting, holding and shooting, pointing and shooting, double pointing and shooting, and my personal favorite, pointing and shooting. Seen here is the Titan's Astrotrain gun, which really goes to show how weird the purple was on that, contrasted with the excellent, deep, bluish purple they pulled off on this figure. Other poses include telling the kids to get off his lawn, pointing and shooting, and being knocked off balance out of fear from the mega cannon that's being shoved in his face. And finally, one pose he doesn't pull off too well, the superhero landing pose. This is because, though his articulation is great, his proportions aren't. He's got big, huge shins and really short calves, which make this pose really hard to pull off, which seems to be par for the course for most Astrotrains. Other examples of figures that can do this, though, are a modified Nightbird and a Siege Starscream. Although I will give Astrotrain this, he does pull it off way better than the Titans version can. So yeah, Astrotrain is a fantastic figure. He's meaty. The transformation is great. Both of them, that is. I don't think there's a single bit of hollow plastic found on him. The articulation is awesome. This is the first official Astrotrain that's looked exactly like Astrotrain in such a very long time. And I don't think I could gush any further about how great this leader class figure is. Well, I guess it's time to address that, isn't it? So this whole leader class debacle has really split the fan base. On the one hand, you have people that have been used to buying leader class figures and having them come in at 12 inches or so, and this is how it's been for the last decade. And then Siege arrived and started putting out leader class figures that weren't overly big in some cases, and that's thrown everyone out of whack. So yeah, on one hand, you have people expecting a leader to be leader sized, and on the other hand, you have people expecting leader class amount of plastic. And if that's what your argument is, technically you're not wrong. Like, look at this. We have a leader and he came with a tender 5 weapons. That's nuts. Put them all together and pour that into the figure itself, and he probably would be the size of 2013 Jetfire, who is mostly hollow on the inside. But take away all those accessories and, well, it leaves a bit to be desired. And this is highlighted even further when you stand it next to Titan's Return Voyager class Astrotrain. Like, we live in a point in time where a Voyager from 3 years ago is now taller than our leader classes, and people are okay with this. Like, here's the current Voyager class Starscream, and the two are nearly the same height. Some people say this is exactly the height they want, and to that I say, well, good for you. I hope you enjoy. I, on the other hand, look at these pictures from the G1 cartoon and wonder why on earth he wasn't the same size as the old Titan's Return Astrotrain, if nothing else than to replace the figure and have him look outstanding sitting next to a Titan's Blitzwing, which was such a great figure I really don't see a need to update it. Mind you, if it does get an update in Earthrise or whatever Part 3 is, I wouldn't be surprised at this point. Some other people argue that if you take the top of the tender and click him into the shoes, that he does get the height I'm mostly looking for. And fair enough on the height argument, I guess. It does look a little better. But again, I really liked the Titan sizing compared to the new Siege figures. I liked the idea that the triple changes were a little bigger and were considered the brute force here. I liked displaying them behind the other figures just because they did poke their heads up above Megatron and company, and now Astrotrain really doesn't, unless of course you add the stilts. But I'm of the camp that doesn't like having to add stilts to my figure to make them look taller. I'm not 9 feet tall because I added yardsticks to the bottom of my feet. Like, if that's the case, may I present to you Supreme Class Siege Mirage? And just look at these former figures to see how tall Mirage truly is. He's bigger than Leader Class Jetfire, bigger than Leader Class Astrotrain, more commanding than an Ultra Magnus. Finally, an Autobot that can stand up to the might of Masterpiece Megatron, Combiner Wars Bruticus, and Knockoff Devastator. Like, this argument that adding platform shoes is a legitimate way of making your figure the correct size is kind of silly and absolutely falls into the category of parts forming. Now back to Astrotrain. One way to definitely make him feel his size though, let's go back to World's Smallest Hot Rod. Here's a figure that was in scale and train mode, and now look at him. Had mass shifting not been a thing, you'd be looking at the new Titan class here. Isn't that crazy? So anyway, that's been my review for Siege Leader Class Astrotrain. This is such an incredible figure. I love how meaty and chunky and fun he is. The colors look absolutely incredible. The design, the intricate detail, the low center of balance, basically nearly everything about this figure as a standalone figure is top notch. But unfortunately, he won't be replacing my Titan's Return into my collection just yet. Unless they make a Siege Blitzwing that's the same height, or a knockoff comes out that's about 6% bigger in every way, this will be going into my collection of robots that doesn't really fit into my main cast for filming. Otherwise, I'll have to resort to trick photography every time I want to use the figure, and that's a lot of unnecessary work I'd rather avoid. Again, it is such a fantastic figure. It's been so much fun to animate, but the size is wrong for all intents and purposes, and that really chuffs my nuggets. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow.